My name is James Rohn. Welcome back to Story for Heart. She healed an entire town with her bare hand, and they threw her out like garbage. For 2 years, Clara Whitmore was the only thing standing between the people of Dust Valley and death. When old Dr. Aldridge passed quietly one winter night, nobody appointed her his replacement. She simply kept showing up. She pulled a miner's crushed hand back from the edge of infection when any other town would have watched him lose the arm. She sat beside a mother for 14 straight hours during a birth that should have killed them both, and it didn't, because Clara refused to let it. She stretched 3 months of laudanum across a supply shortage so carefully that not a single patient was left screaming in pain. This was not luck. This was skill, discipline, and a kind of devotion most people never show to anything in their lives. And for a long time she told herself that was enough. That being needed was the same as being valued. That good work spoke for itself. She was wrong. Because into that town rode Henry Wallace, a merchant who understood something dark and simple about frontier life. Control the supply lines and you control the people. Within months he owned the general store, the livery, the grain mill, the feed warehouse. Then he came for the one thing he didn't yet control, the clinic. He offered Clara money, expansion, even a proper doctor to work beside her. All she had to do was let his warehouse hide contraband in her storage room. She looked him dead in the eye and said no. That single word cost her everything. Wallace didn't argue. He didn't threaten again. He simply began to whisper. A rumor here, a poisoned child who was never actually sick. A comment there. Her methods called unorthodox, a polite word for reckless. A forged letter questioning her nursing certificate, produced and then conveniently lost before she could examine it. One by one, the faces that once needed her stopped meeting her eyes. The miner she saved crossed the street to avoid her. The mother she'd saved twice over did the same. And the town council, men who owed her their children's lives, voted to strip her of the clinic while her qualifications were reviewed. Wallace sat in the back of that meeting. He said nothing. He didn't need to. This is what it looks like when power decides truth doesn't matter, when a woman's competence means nothing against a wealthy man's whispers. Clara Whitmore did everything right, and it wasn't enough to save her. But watch closely, because what looks like an ending here is only the closing of one door. And there is a road ahead she doesn't yet know is about to change everything. There's a moment that reveals a person's true character, and it isn't when things are going well. It's when everything is collapsing around them and they have to decide who they're going to be on the way down. For Clara Whitmore, that moment came the night before she left Dust Valley. For good. She could have pleaded with the town council. She could have groveled to Henry Wallace, promised to look the other way, taken the deal that would have saved her position and her reputation. Many people would have. Most people would have. Survival has a way of making compromise look reasonable. Clara didn't do any of that. Instead, she sat alone in the clinic by lamplight on her last night. And she wrote. Not a plea. Not a defense. She documented every patient she had treated, every supply she had ordered, every decision she had made and precisely why she had made it. Nobody asked her to do this. It would change nothing about her situation. She did it because she needed to know for herself that if anyone ever looked at the record of her work, they would find it honest from beginning to end. That is not the act of a woman trying to save her job. That is the act of a woman protecting something more valuable than a job, her own integrity. When morning came, she packed a single suitcase. When Henry Wallace arrived expecting tears, expecting a confrontation, expecting some final desperate plea he could dismiss with a smile, he found none of that. He found a woman who had already finished grieving what he thought she was only beginning to lose. He dropped the clinic keys at her feet like she was beneath even bending down for. She didn't bend. She looked him in the eye and reminded him that she had already told him. She was prepared to regret her choice, and she meant it. Then she walked out. No goodbye, no tears. 50 miles of open country ahead of her, and not one person watching her go. 3 miles down that road, the anger that had carried her out the door began to cool, and underneath it was something rawer, not grief exactly, but the specific exhaustion of someone who fought a battle correctly and lost it anyway. She had no plan. She was 31 years old, more capable than any two doctors in the territory, and she was walking into nothing with one suitcase and her name. This is what dignity costs, and this is also what dignity buys, because a woman, willing to walk away from everything, rather than compromise who she is a woman the road is about to reward in a way she cannot yet see. Clara heard the hoofbeats behind her about 20 minutes into her walk south, one horse steady, then slowing to match her pace. She didn't turn around. 2 years on the frontier had taught her that a woman alone on an open road learns to keep walking, because turning around is so often read as an invitation. So she kept her eyes forward until a low, quiet voice said simply, "Ma'am." The man on the horse was William Carter, and everyone in the territory knew the name even if they'd never spoken to him. Carter Ridge Ranch, 4,000 acres of the finest grazing land around, 40 men employed year-round, the kind of wealth that never needed to announce itself. And he had absolutely no reason to stop for a disgraced frontier nurse walking a cold, empty road, except he did. That road runs 52 miles before it hits anything with a roof and a fire, he said, and a woman shouldn't have to make that walk alone if she doesn't have to. Clara, hardened by 2 years of men who talked about what women should and shouldn't do, pushed back immediately, reminding him that half the men who'd said things like that to her were the very men who'd just run her out of town. William didn't flinch, and he didn't defend them. "I know Henry Wallace," he said, "and I know what his version of any story is worth." He hadn't come because of rumors. He'd come because his own best hand, Tom Eberhardt, had told him what Clara did the night she saved his crushed hand from amputation. William Carter had one fact he trusted, and it was enough. She refused the horse but let him walk beside her, leading it, over miles of cold road and conversation, neither of them filled with unnecessary noise. Something rare passed between them. Not pity, not charity, but respect. He asked her why she'd chosen the frontier over safer, wealthier patients back east. She told him plainly, because the frontier needed someone willing to be good enough to matter when a person had only one chance to survive. He asked if she had been. She said yes without hesitation. Then the sky turned. A storm rolled in from the northwest with the kind of speed only the territory produced, and William's ranch was the only shelter for miles. Clara resisted, and she was headed south. Not northeastwism, but the math of survival overruled her pride, and she agreed on her terms only until the storm passed. What she found at Carter Ridge wasn't the cold, impressive wealth she'd expected. It was a house built for a family that never grew. 8 empty bedrooms, built by a father who lost a son, inhabited now by a man carrying his own quiet grief. Over a kitchen table built for work, not entertaining. Over soup she made from whatever she found in his pantry. 2 people who had each been hollowed out by loss in different ways sat and, for the first time that day, simply understood each other. This is where the story turns. Not with rescue, not with charity, but with 2 people recognizing, almost against their will, that they had found someone who saw them clearly for exactly who they were.